Deep within the dense, emerald embrace of the Central American rainforests, a silence reigns today that is both heavy and profound. It is a silence broken only by the guttural roar of howler monkeys and the rustle of wind through the canopy. But if you strip away the vines, remove the layers of moss, and rewind the clock over 1,000 years, this silence evaporates. In its place, you would hear the cacophony of a thriving, pulsating metropolis. You would hear the rhythm of stone chisels against limestone, the chanting of priests atop towering pyramids painted in blood red and brilliant blue, the haggling of merchants trading jade for cacao, and the collective breath of a civilization that charted the stars with a precision that rivals modern astronomy. This was not a world waiting to be discovered. This was a thriving world. It was a world that had already discovered the secrets of time, mathematics, and the human soul. This was the world of the Maya. To understand how the Maya lived before the arrival of European sails on their horizon, we must first shatter the common illusion that they were a single, unified empire like Rome or the Incas. They were something far more complex and volatile. Imagine a landscape dotted with independent city-states, rival kingdoms like Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, and Copan, each vying for dominance, each ruled by a divine king, or Kuhul Ajau, who served as the living conduit between the mortal world and the supernatural realm. For over 2,000 years, these cities flourished, evolved, and warred, creating a tapestry of culture that was as brutal as it was beautiful. The foundation of this existence, the very engine that allowed great stone temples to rise above the jungle canopy, was an intricate relationship with the land. The Maya were, first and foremost, masters of their environment. While the rainforest appears lush, the soil is often thin and poor, and the water supply in the northern lowlands is trapped in underground river systems. To survive here, let alone build a civilization of millions, required agricultural genius. They didn't just farm, they engineered the earth. They utilized a technique known as the milpa cycle, a rotation of crops that kept the soil alive, planting maize, beans, and squash together, the three sisters. The corn provided the stalk for the beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen in the soil to feed the corn, and the squash spread its broad leaves over the ground to retain moisture and prevent weeds. But they went further. In the swampy Bajos, they constructed raised fields, turning unusable wetlands into hyper-productive farmland. They terraced the hillsides to capture rain and stop erosion. They were terraformers, bending the hostile jungle to their will to feed a population density that, in some areas, rivaled that of modern Los Angeles. For the average Maya commoner, life was governed not by the grand politics of the kings, but by the rising and setting of the sun and the demands of the harvest. The vast majority of the population lived in the hinterlands surrounding the great stone cores of the cities. Their homes were modest, constructed of wattle and daub with thatched roofs, designed to keep the interior cool during the sweltering days and warm during the cool jungle nights. A typical day would begin before dawn. The women were the hearth keepers, rising early to soak the dried maize in lime water, a chemical process called nixtamalization that released essential nutrients. Without this scientific breakthrough, the Maya diet would have led to malnutrition. With it, corn became the fuel of an empire. The rhythmic sound of the mano grinding corn against the stone matate was the heartbeat of the household, the sound of breakfast, lunch, and dinner being prepared, in the form of tamales, tortillas, and a thick corn-based gruel called atole. While the women managed the home, wove intricate textiles from cotton, and tended to the family gardens, the men would head to the fields or to the city centers for labor service. This was a society built on the backs of its people. There were no beasts of burden, no horses, no oxen, and they did not use the wheel for transport, though they put it on children's toys. Every massive limestone block used to build the temple of the Great Jaguar was quarried, cut, and hauled by human muscle, rolled on logs, and pulled by ropes under the punishing tropical sun. This labor was often a form of tax owed to the king, a spiritual and civic duty that maintained the cosmic order. But life wasn't just toil. The Maya lived in a world vibrant with color and commerce. If you were to walk into a market plaza in a city like Chichen Itza during the post-classic period, your senses would be overwhelmed. The air would smell of copal incense, roasting meat, and fermentation. Traders, the pueblos, arrived with goods carried on their backs from hundreds of miles away. You would see obsidian from the volcanic highlands, sharp as a scalpel, used for weapons and tools. You would see jade, the most precious substance in their world, greener than the forest itself, representing life and eternity. There were quetzal feathers, shimmering and iridescent, destined to adorn the headdresses of the nobility. And there was cacao. The Maya were the chocolate lords of the ancient world. Cacao beans were so valuable they were used as currency. You could buy a rabbit for 10 beans, or a slave for 100. Chocolate was drunk as a frothy, spicy, bitter beverage, often mixed with chili peppers and honey, reserved for the elite and special occasions. Separating the commoners from the heavens were the nobility and the priesthood, who lived in the stone palaces at the city center. Their lives were a theater of ritual and excess. They flattened the foreheads of their infants with boards to create a distinctive, elongated profile, a mark of beauty and status reminiscent of an ear of corn. They filed their teeth to points and inlaid them with jade and pyrite. They wore heavy ear spools and elaborate tattoos. For the elite, appearance was a language, broadcasting their power and their proximity to the gods. And it was the gods who truly ruled the Maya. The spiritual world was not a separate place. It was woven into the fabric of reality. The Maya saw the world as a crocodile floating in a cosmic sea. Above was the 13-layered upper world, the domain of the celestial deities. Below was Xibalba, the 9-layered underworld, a place of fright and decay ruled by the lords of death. Humans were caught in the middle. To keep the sun rising, to ensure the rains came, to prevent the universe from collapsing, the gods demanded sustenance. That sustenance was Kuch, the sacred life force found in blood. This brings us to the most sensationalized yet essential aspect of their lives: sacrifice. While history often focuses on the gruesome, for the Maya, bloodletting was an act of piety and necessity. The king was expected to pierce his own tongue or genitals with a stingray spine or obsidian blade, letting his royal blood drip onto bark paper, which was then burned. The rising smoke was a direct message to the ancestors. Yes, there was human sacrifice, particularly of captured warriors from rival cities, but it was a ritualized conclusion to the endemic warfare that plagued the region. Wars were often fought specifically to capture high-value prisoners for these rituals, a star war triggered by the movements of Venus and Jupiter. Speaking of planets, the Maya intellect was staggering. Long before Europe emerged from the Dark Ages, Maya astronomers were tracking the movements of the celestial bodies with an accuracy that modern computers have only marginally improved upon. They operated without telescopes, using only crossed sticks to create sightlines. Yet they calculated the solar year to 365.242 days. They understood the cycles of the moon and the eclipses. They developed the concept of zero, a shell symbol, centuries before it was used in the West, allowing them to perform complex mathematics. Their obsession with time was absolute. They didn't just have one calendar, they had 3 interlocking systems: the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred calendar; the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar; and the Long Count, which tracked the linear passage of days from a creation date in 3114 BC. For the Maya, time was cyclical and burdened. Every day was a god, carrying the load of time on its back. And the omens of that day dictated everything from when to plant to when to go to war. Leisure and ritual also merged in the famous ball game, or pits. Every major city had a ball court, an eye-shaped arena flanked by sloping walls. The game was played with a heavy, solid rubber ball that could break bones. Players, wearing protective padding, had to keep the ball in the air using only their hips, thighs, and elbows, attempting to drive it through a stone hoop set high on the wall. But this was more than a sport. It was a reenactment of the hero twins' victory over the lords of the underworld from their creation myth, the Popol Vuh. The ball represented the sun moving through the sky. Sometimes the game was played for fun or gambling, but on sacred occasions the stakes were life and death. with the losers, or sometimes the winners, depending on the interpretation, being sacrificed to the gods. However, this magnificent civilization was not immune to catastrophe. It is a common misconception that the Maya disappeared or were wiped out entirely by the Spanish. The truth is more tragic and fascinating. The classic Maya collapse occurred centuries before the Europeans arrived, roughly between 800 and 900 AD. In the southern lowlands, the great cities like Tikal and Palenque were abandoned to the jungle. Why? The consensus points to a perfect storm. Overpopulation pushed the delicate agricultural systems to the breaking point. Deforestation to burn lime for stucco plaster altered the local climate, leading to man-made droughts. When the rains failed, the divine kings, whose primary job was to ensure water, lost their mandate from heaven. Warfare spiraled out of control as desperate cities fought for dwindling resources. The people simply walked away, migrating north to the Yucatan Peninsula or retreating into the highlands. So, when we ask how they lived before they were conquered, we are looking at two distinct eras. There was the golden age of the classic period, a time of god-kings and massive temple building, and then there was the post-classic period. By the time the Spanish caravels appeared off the coast in the early 16th century, the Maya world had transformed. The great southern cities were already ancient ruins, haunted places of the ancestors. But in the north, cities like Mayapan and Tulum were thriving. This society was more commercial, less focused on absolute divine kingship, and more decentralized. They were still building, still trading, still writing their history in bark paper codices. The arrival of the Spanish was not a sudden lights-out event, but a grinding, century-long apocalypse. The Maya did not fall easily. Unlike the Aztecs, who had a centralized capital that could be decapitated, the Maya were a hydra. Conquering one city meant nothing. You had to conquer the next, and the next. The Spanish brought steel and gunpowder, but their most devastating weapon was invisible: smallpox, influenza, and measles. These diseases raced ahead of the conquistadors, decimating the population, killing the scribes, the priests, and the elders who held the knowledge of the culture. The social fabric unraveled. Yet, despite the conquest, the burning of their libraries by Bishop Landa, and the imposition of Christianity, the Maya never truly ended. They adapted. They hid their gods behind the masks of Catholic saints. They retreated into the mountains where the Spanish horses couldn't follow. The way they lived before, the reverence for the maize, the weaving of the huipil, the language, the distinct calendar keeping, went underground. When we visualize the Maya before the conquest, we should not see a lost people. We should see a civilization of immense vibrancy and intellectual achievement. We should see a people who woke up every morning to the smell of burning copal and corn dough, who looked up at the night sky and saw a map of their destiny, who built stone mountains to touch the gods, and who created a legacy so durable that the jungle could swallow their cities, but it could never swallow their spirit. They lived in a world where every tree, every animal, and every day was alive with spiritual meaning, a world of terrifying beauty where the boundary between the earth and the sky was as thin as the edge of an obsidian blade. This was their life, a testament to human ingenuity, blooming in the heart of the rainforest, echoing through time long before the first foreign boot stepped onto their shores.